Hello and welcome to the Intentional Teacher Podcast. I am thrilled. I'm so thrilled that you are here with me. If you are new to the podcast, hello, welcome. My name is Lauren Manick, and my full name is Lauren McLaughlin, but Lauren Manick kind of came about a number of years ago when my students actually discovered my little blog that I had at the time. It was a DIY blog. And they discovered absolutely everything that I had on there, what my husband looked like, my wedding photos, all sorts of things. And then from here, I always went by Lauren Manick online. And now that I'm not in the classroom anymore, I do share my last name, but that is kind of where Lauren Manick first came from. And so in this episode, we are going to be talking about sick season. And you can probably even hear in my voice that this was inspired by real events that I am currently down with a little bit of a cough and a scratchy throat. And my son, my poor son, oh my gosh, he's been sick on and off. We've been in and out of doctor's appointments, ear aches and sore throats and antibiotics and so much this month for him. So I'm sure if it's happening for our family, it is likely happening in your classroom and maybe for your family too. So I wanted to share some ideas and strategies that can help you get through sick season today without sacrificing your own needs. That's huge for me. And without sacrificing your students' needs too. So these ideas, some of them you may be familiar with, and you might just need a little inspiration to get them started this week. And maybe some of them are new to you and they could be a quick, easy thing for you to get started on after you listen to this episode. Because I don't know, I want you to think back actually to maybe the first time you got really sick. And have you ever experienced something where you're like, maybe you suddenly got sick and you got food poisoning and you were like throwing up and then writing supply notes, like teacher sub notes, or maybe you thought about going in, like taking a day, but you just like the thought of actually getting everything organized was so exhausting that you just decided to go to school anyway. That's what we want to avoid. So let's talk. I'm going to be sharing 5 ideas that are going to help you and your students when either of you is sick. So let's go. Number one is to have as many plug and play teaching strategies and routines that were going to work for you, because the more plug and play, and I'll explain you what that is in a second, the more plug and play you have, the easier and faster it is going to be to write individual supply notes. And I say supply because a lot of teachers call them supply. We call them TTOCs actually here in BC's, like teacher teaching on call. But I will use supply teachers, sub teachers, substitute teacher interchangeably in this episode. But a plug and play structure is the idea that instead of starting every lesson fully from scratch, that can be, while very creative, it can be very time intensive. And also it can lead to more challenging behaviors in the classroom because your students don't always know what to expect. So you can decide how much structure you want to include in your lesson and in your day-to-day plans. But I like to have at least a beginning of my class and end of my class routine. So that might look in elementary, what the beginning of your day looks like up until recess. And like with every kind of transition of in and out of the classroom, you have some sort of routine. If you're teaching high school or blocks, it might be this is at the beginning of the block looks like and the end of the block looks like. And it might be even more detailed from there. But the more routines that you have, the simpler it's going to be to write your subplans, because your kids are already going to know the routine, and it's going to make it easier for you to write them, because you won't need to give as many instructions to the teacher on call, because your students will already know what to do, and it's much faster to write your lesson plans. So first tip is to have routines, or what I call plug and play structure. So you're just plugging in different activities into the structure that you always follow. So an idea for this might be, maybe you have a bell ringer you always follow at the beginning of class, then you might do homework, and then you might review last week's lesson, you start today's lesson, then you do an activity, then you do some sort of formative assessment, kids follow up. And that's kind of like the way your class rolls. So having an overall structure that you tend to follow will make writing your sub plans a lot easier. So that is strategy number one, have plug and play structure. And if you'd like to learn more about this, this is something that we dive into in intentional teaching in the program I run. So you can always send me a DM on Instagram if you would like to hear more about it. Number two is to have a sub tub. And this is especially helpful if you teach, you can have it even in high school, but especially in elementary school. You might have just a sub binder in high school, but a sub tub is basically plans, like all the notes your supply teacher might need, already photocopied emergency plans, so that you can just say, go to the sub tub and everything is already created for you. And this kind of links, so I will link number two and number three together. Number two might be a sub tub that just has like the main, like your class list, all the important information and some different activities to do. But number three is to have emergency sub plans. So you have a few days, kind of like a rainy day fund. If you are thinking about savings, you want to have emergency sub plans. So then if you suddenly really get sick or suddenly a kid's sick at home, you already have plans ready to go and you can just say, go to the sub folder. So emergency sub plans are things that maybe you've bought them on Teachers Pay Teachers. There's lots of them out there. I have a few for high school French immersion. So emergency sub plans are great. I personally, why would we create them when we can just buy them for $5? That's my opinion, but you can make your own if you want. And then the sub tub is where it's actually housed in your classroom, where everything's already photocopied, your class list is there, maybe a map of the school is there, a teacher down the hall that you're friends with that they can ask for help if they need it, your substitute teacher, any helpful kids, maybe your seating plan, any kind of like important information is in the sub tub, and then like activities that are already printed out. So then you know if you really get sick, everything's there ready to go for a supply teacher. And one thing that I wanted to mention on this topic too is before I started, because now I'm running my own business, right? So I mentor teachers and I support them. I help you stop working evenings and weekends. That's my main program that I run. And I also do a lot of consulting for business owners with through one-on-one. And one thing that I was struck by once I started doing because I still teach, I just teach group lessons on Zoom now with teachers, is if I'm sick, no one's going to come in and sub for me. Like I either have to do it sick or I have to cancel on people or I change things and I still have work left to do. And I was struck by when I was a teacher, I was always like, oh, it's the only job where we have to take more work, do more work in order to take time off. But I'm going to challenge that thought, and not everyone's going to agree with me, and that's okay. But I'm going to challenge that thought and say that a lot of jobs actually do. It's going to be more work for us to take time off because we're missing a work day. It's normal. But what about if we appreciated that we can actually take a day off and we know things are still running? Like if we set up a few systems, we have someone in general qualified who's coming to take our place and we can fully take a day off. There's already that built-in predictability into your work. Now, it might not always be the case. Sometimes we have to, if there's a shortage, like other teachers have to cover for you and it's hard. I totally agree and totally see it, but it's still nice to think that like if you have to take a sick day, you're replaceable. It's okay for you to take a sick day. Your students will still have someone who will be there to take care of them, to teach them. Like you are replaceable. And I think it's important to remember that as a mindset shift, that you're replaceable and it's okay to take time off. There will be someone to take your place, but you're not replaceable in your family's life, in your own life. Like your health is not replaceable. So that is another little caveat that I wanted to add into this episode. You are replaceable. It's okay for you to take time off. And these are little ideas that can make it easier for you to take it when you need it, or when a family member, a kid of yours, someone in your family needs you to be there. So we have gone through 1, 2, and 3. Step 4 and 5 are more about when a student is away or absent. Like I got an email from my son's teacher, and she said he is one of 6 that was away yesterday. So what do we do when we have sick students and they miss a class and then they've forgotten this and they're not caught up? And it's like just kind of like a management irritating thing that we have to deal with, right? So I wanted to give you 2 strategies for when you have absent students from illness, or even from, from sports, this and that, and special events and stuff that they're attending. So the first is to have a student absent form, especially if you're in high school. Even if you're in elementary school and you've only quote unquote got 25 kids, if you're the classroom teacher. But if you have multiple different grades or classes that you're teaching, and you have like 100 and 150 kids, this is going to be even more beneficial and helpful for you, is to have a student absent form. So oftentimes when I was teaching high school, I would have a kid come up to me and say, "Madame, can I miss this day? I have a hockey tournament," for example. And sometimes teachers get annoyed that kids expect them to remember all of the things that they're going to be away for. I do not expect myself to remember that. I don't expect them to think that. What I expect them to do is to fill it out on my form. So here's what it looks like. It's on the wall close to the door, and a kid needs to fill out their name, the date they're going to be missing. They're going to check off that I signed it and they've told me, and they're going to write down the name of the kid that they're going to check in with when they're absent to take in any missing work. So this isn't going to be for as much if a kid is sick, but this is when they know in advance that they're going to be away. So student absent form. So anytime a kid comes to me and they say, "Can I please miss class this day?" I say, "Yes, no problem." I sign it. I say, "Before you go and put it away, make sure you write it on the board." Or sometimes I even get them to write it on the board first, and then I'll sign it. And they need to provide a student's name so that they have some form of accountability. I'm not going to share all the things that you missed while you were away. That is on you, especially as they get older. So that's a great one for older students. I would even say for like grade 4, 5, even by grade 6, I'd be doing that. Grade 4, 5, you maybe don't want to, you could say, "Hey, check in with a student." That might be a lot for them, but they can still write the name the day they're going to be absent, and that they checked it off from you. Like if you're teaching like a rotary subject where you're going from class to class, that's still going to be helpful, because then you can look and see, like when you have a bunch of kids absent that day, you can just look at your form and go, "Oh, right, there's a soccer tournament." Example. So number 4 is a student absent form. Number 5 is a student secretary. So when you are handing out, this is a class job, when you're handing out any handouts that went on through the day, you have a student who takes a note of all the kids who are absent that day, and they take extra copies. They write the student's name on it. So say I was thinking of like Mohammed. I taught a lot of Mohammed's sick today. Then Jessica writes her name on her own sheet, but takes an extra sheet, writes Mohammed down on that extra handout, and then puts it in the absent forms folder system that you can have set up in your classroom. So then when a kid comes back, they can look, "Oh, Madame, what did I miss?" We'll say, "Madame," because I always talk French, "What did I miss?" You can go to the folder and look in your block or in whatever subject, however you want to organize it, for the handouts that you missed, and the student secretary already got that set up. So you don't need to worry about having extra sheets or worrying about what they missed out on and so forth. And the other thing again too is, even if they're sick, it's good for them to have a buddy for them to look and talk to catch up on missed work. So they might have a buddy that they talk to, or maybe you have it online so they can see it, but it's their responsibility as they get older, as they're in high school, to know what they missed and to check in with you. So those are my 5. And I always like to give us an extra bonus one, just to give you some other ideas. The last thing to think about is, say you're homesick and you're not hugely sick, but you had an appointment or something, or even more likely, you're not sick, but your child is suddenly sick and you have to take the day off. I like to make sure that if I am suddenly at home and I have a little bit of work to do, that it's easily accessible for me at home if I want to get work done. So my bonus point for you is to think about, how can I make that possible? Do I have all my marks, my grades on a piece of paper, and I have that at school, and then I come home and I'm suddenly at home and I had grading to catch up on and I can't do it because that stuff's at school? Um, if that's the case, try to have one centralized digital place for all your grades, all your marks, so you can always catch up on that if you have time. You're not like thinking, oh no, it's at home. Oh no, it's at school. And as much as possible, when you can, now we have the option to hand things in digitally. That was not the case before COVID for most of us. Especially maybe a little bit, but when I first started teaching, like, I'm not that old, but we really didn't do that. We always handed in on paper. So when you can, try to do things digitally. So then if you are, like, if you're a parent and suddenly your kid is homesick and you have a little bit of extra time to get some grading done or some planning done, you could maybe think about, for an hour, I'm going to finish some marking while I'm at home. And I have it on hand, even though it was a surprise day that I'm at home for sick for, because a lot of my work is digital. So that's my bonus tip for you. So let's recap our 6 ideas to get through if you are sick or if a student is sick. Number 1 is having plug and play structure to speed up your planning and to make it a lot easier for writing your sub notes. Number 2 is to have a sub tub, a centralized place where your teachers that come in for you can easily find what they need. Number 3 is an emergency sub plan, or a few days worth. So you can put that in your sub tub, and then that way they can easily find what they need, and you can take a day off if you're suddenly sick or someone in your family is suddenly sick. Number 4 is a student absent form, especially for grades maybe 4 and up. If they're going to be away, they write that on the board, so it's not up to you to remember that. Number 5 is a student secretary. So a student who is responsible for writing down the names of students who are absent and taking their handouts for them, so they're all ready to go when a student comes back to school. And then our bonus was, have as much as you can digital if you have little kids at home and you might be stuck at home while they are sick. If you want to get some work done, having your marks digital, hand in like assignments that are done digitally. That way you don't need to worry about having all of your marks, your marking books, all that kind of stuff with you at home. You can actually get a little bit of work done while you have the chance. So those were my 6. If you found this helpful, please let me know on Instagram. You can follow me at I am Lauren Monique, or Lauren Monique. I would love, love, love to hear from you. And if you could, it would be fantastic for you to subscribe and leave a review for my newer podcast, because when you leave a review, that makes it a lot more discoverable for other teachers. And I would love to help more teachers simplify their teaching so that they can enjoy it more. And so they can work less as well, just like I share on the podcast. So subscribe, leave a review if you have a moment, and send me a DM on Instagram. I would love to hear from you. Okay, I will see you in next week's episode.